So back to what I'm saying, what is the basics of defense? Well, eliminate the big play. Well, how do you do that? You get 11 guys to the ball every snap. And that's something that can't just be mouth surface. You got to have it. It's effort and pursuit is a thing that's going to let you be successful. If you know you're coordinated and you've got the proper defense set and you've got the proper recognition of the people that are on the field, uh, you've got formations. The first thing you've got to be able to do is be where you're supposed to be and see what you're supposed to see, and you got to listen and hear. I you just for sake of conversation here, here's a formation. I know most people today they play in three wide receivers, a tight end, one back, one quarterback. I just drew this up to make the point on what I'm talking about in terms of be where you're supposed to be, communication. This would be the closed side of that formation. We would call this formation. People got the numbered situation now is how many tight ends, how many backs. It's 12, it's 11, it's whatever. I always went by a name, and all my books are in names. This particular is just regular personnel, which is one tight end, two backs, and two wide receivers. We call that regular. And this formation strength is over here. So as you're looking at that formation, you're going to call the strength over here. So somebody on that team is a middle linebacker. In my defense, we had two middle linebackers. We always played 3-4. We had two outside backers and two inside backer, and the Buck, who was always on the tight end side. Buck, Mac, Sam, and Will. That's what we call them. Sam was strong, Will was weak, Buck was the mouthpiece to call everything, and Mac is the open side inside linebacker. Buck would set the defense. So as you called in the huddle, let's say you called a strong zone in the huddle, and he would come up. The first thing you got to recognize, where is the strength? And these guys got to all hear where the strength is. And this would be strong over here. The other thing that we would always want to know for sure is, are we on the wide side of the field? Well, you can see here the ball's over here closer to this hash mark, so this would be wide right. That's going to be a factor in some of the defenses you would call. And change the strength motion. Right, this is strong. Where is the strong side of that formation? Well, you can look at it and see there's two wide receivers or two receivers here, and there's one over there and two running backs back there. So it's strong right. So these are basic nomenclature phrases of starting out with your defense. Okay, coach, I know that's a basic. I'm going to be basic here for a minute because it leads to what I believe is you got to be able to line up correctly, and you got to get the defense set. Well, how do you do that to eliminate mental error? This is how you do it. Once he calls close right, that's going to set your lines. There's your tight end. Once he calls strong right, that's going to set your coverage on everything. So you're in good shape with communication off of that. This formation down here, this is three wide receivers and two backs, no tight ends. We call that queens. Well, queens carried strength over here. Change the strength motion. Who could change the strength? This guy had to go over here to change strength. If this guy is on the ball, he can go over. Only one of them can go, and they can't be both off the ball unless there's the guy down in here on the ball. And then one guy going in motion would maybe change strength still, because you would go to the two wide receivers. But these are rules that you would set up before you even start teaching the players. And that would be that personnel group. This group, this is what I got here, tens. tens people. So this is 2 tight ends, only 1 wide receiver, 2 backs, and a quarterback. So what is that? It's usually a power set, but it can be anything. It's this guy flex out. It's just a regular set. In here, you get tens heavy, where you get a pair of tight ends. You still got 2 backs. You still got 1 wide receiver and 2 tight ends, so it's still in the tens package. If you get this, you got 3 tight ends. 3 tight ends and 1 wide receiver. So we call that clubs. They're just clubs. So as soon as the whole team heard clubs, they knew what they were facing. But the guy setting the defense, he would still go off of strength, weakness, and this strength is going to be over here to the pair because it's a running set. And so this would be strong left, and you would be ready to play from there. This guy would change the strength because he'd be going from a pair there to a pair here. And this guy would only change a little coverage adjustment, but your line set would still always be around that right there. And you could get all of them loaded over here, but that clubs trips heavy. The reason I'm taking a second to go through this is all of this has to be presented to the team in pre-practice, actually pre-season information. I guess you guys can Zoom quite a bit now, but you got to get this understood, and this is called establishing your nomenclature so that you can line up and know what's going to change what. Down here, I've got 4 wide receivers, no tight ends, a quarterback, and a back. We call that flush. Now, one thing about this situation, you got the same formation on this side as you got on that side. You got 2 wides here, 2 wides there. They're both split from the tackles, and you got 1 back. You could have a gun, which you're probably going to get here, but that back's going to be all set one side to the other. You could still get him under with the back neutral. I always had a rule that whenever we started getting these extra wide receivers, started with 3, and you had the quarterback underneath the center, it was an alert for the run, and we had to have somebody in that front group up there say, hey, quarterback's under, because now you're usually playing against him back there in the gun. Now you get a lot of runs from him down there, but this is definitely more of a running situation, particularly once you get extra wide receivers in the game. So with this flush look here, you have to, some formations, they're identical. So if you had, this guy was a tight end there and that guy's a tight end there, what we called ace, they would still be identical formations, 2 wides and 2 tight ends on either side. You have to just make a strength. So I always taught it was always strong to our left. So the guy that's setting the defense for us, it would be in the back of the buck. He would say strong left here, even though there is no difference on one side or the other of that formation. So you get into those situations. I'm talking about getting ready to get them on the field and get them where they can be where they're supposed to be and see what they're supposed to see. Whole numbers. What are you going to name when you're talking to them so they'll understand what you're talking to, and you don't have to have a picture in front of them all the time. You can just say, oh, that's in the 2 hole. That ball hit the 1 hole. It hit the 0 hole. Are you going to name the odd holes to the right and the even holes to the left? I mean, those are decisions that you make when you start day 1 and get your notebook put together. That's something else that you got to discuss with it. What's going to be your change of strength motion? What will set the motion? Here's a regular set with a wide receiver going to slot. Slots 2 wide receivers on the same side of the ball. That's always strength. Now that is the passing strength for sure, but the running strength's here. So you would set set the front over close right, but the formation would be strong left for the passing situation. Okay, so then the reason I had those drawn up because you're talking with words and without a little bit of a picture, it's a little harder to at least see the what the problem is. The problem is you have to have the whole team, the whole defensive team has to be hooked in to your nomenclature. And when you're telling them you have this is strong left and that's going to go to strong right, or this is closed left and you're going to go to close right, then damn it, you got to be able to adjust our alignment to that. For instance, if we wanted to get out of a straight 3-3-4 defense, which is the nose on the center and your ends on the tackle, your strong backer on the tight end, your weak backer outside, and your two backers stacked in there, we would go to an eagle or we could go to a falcon. And eagle would kick them one way and a bird would kick them the other way, or a sparrow. That's just our nomenclature. But to the players, it was like English speaking English, or if you're French speaking French, you were talking their language. But this nose couldn't line up until this backer told him where the close side of the formation was. Because all those different formations I was just showing you, you might have two tight ends on either side. Well, if I'm the nose, what the hell, where do I go? And the buckbacker would just say close right, and then everybody could line up. In this particular defense, we had alignments were designed as we spoke our own language. That was a plus. He was to the tight end, so he was plus. This guy's in a 3, so each lineman, defensive lineman, had 3 different alignments that he could have. The nose could be a 0, which was right on the center. He could be plus or minus, which would be in the A gap either side. If you were in a 3 gap for the defensive end, you were on the guard's shoulder. If you were sitting in a 4 technique, you were right head up on the tackle. And if you were on the outside gap, you would be in a 5. And for the outside people, you would be in a 6 head up, or you would be a 5 inside, or a 7-9 outside. Now the backers, a lot of times their alignments were tied in with the coverage and they would take precedence. But for all your lining up, for instance, since you had a plus nose here, this guy would actually be sitting in what we call an off gap. And this guy, he would be sitting in a bird because this guy was in a 3, and your gap responsibilities would change off of that front. And this is how, I don't care how you rule it out in your mind. What I told you, you got to know your stuff. How are you going to put these guys? And each one has got to play off of the other one. So everybody's got to know the simple word of eagle plus, that told the line where to line up. That immediately told the backers what their run responsibility was. What was their force, what was their fill, and what was their flow. So you have to have the defend runs, you got to have good force, good flow, and good fill. And everybody's got to get their gap because, a good back, all he needs is a crack and he's gone. So that's why the huddle calls, I always try to tell them as much as I could in a huddle. And it was equal plus open me 63 would be the huddle call on this particular set. And the open part would tell which one of our backers was going to be in the charge, because we rarely would play with just 3 down linemen. I didn't like that. I didn't want to give him 2 gaps too many times, but usually one of them had to take that. And when in this situation, the eagle plus open me 63 enabled them to line up, and we knew the open guy was just the down defensive end then. The advantage of being the 3-4 to me in looking for players to play in the NFL, it was easier to find 250-pound athletes that could run. I believed in speed and athleticism. You talk to offensive guys, speed kills is all they're talking about, and you got to have speed to defend it. and you got to be fast and in shape to cut down the big plays. And that's all I was interested in, to eliminate scoring plays. So we could draft more guys coming out of college that were tremendously athletic at 250 pounds than we could that were 290 to 310. And it was just easier to find them. There's a lot more, actually, bigger athletes today than even when I was coaching. I still would probably prefer the 3-4, because if you start blitzing and talking about varying your formations defensively, that's where I think the 3-4 has the advantage. I don't think it really matters one way or the other, and in terms of the best way to stop a team. But I'm talking here about how we would set the defense so that everybody could align and assign. What we did was we taught each of these positions by technique. So if I told this guy he's in a plus technique, he already had a set of parameter rules that his position coach had taught him. I told him he's in a 3 technique. He had a key. He had people that he would react to, and he knew what his alignment was and his assignment was right away. So that was our method of communication, 11 people being on the same page all the time. When this guy knew that he was in the charge, he knew he could do a couple things call-wise, but he knew what his responsibility was: flow, fill, and force. If you're going to stop runs, somebody's got to force the ball over here. Somebody's got to force the ball over there. We got to keep the ball in here to these guys right here. We can't let the ball get out here, because you're going to make it a track meet. And their halfback's going to be faster than your nose tackle. And you're not going to let your nose tackle play football if you let the ball get out here somewhere on the parameters of the field. You got to have force on every snap. And you got to get the ball back in here so these guys can play. You're talking about 11 to the ball and everybody being a team and everybody getting to the ball. Well, let them play. Don't make them play, get them in a race, because here's a guy that's 300 pounds is going to have to race this guy back here who's making his living being a halfback. So that was an integral part of how I constructed each call, so that once you set the front eagle, these guys, all they needed was closed. They didn't give a damn whether there was a tight end in there or not. Once he said close right, he was going to go over here, and we were ready to go. And these guys, he knew that it was Bird, and he knew there was an off gap, and he knew that he was in the charge with his limitations, and he knew off the coverage where he was going to go. With a 6, he was probably going to be out here in the safety to be forcing in the C gap, but it was all hooked in together and communicated in our own special language. And we met and walked, talked until they understood it. And you also have to get every player on the team's got to know this on the defense part of the team, because this guy may go out at the middle of the first quarter. He may be gone and somebody else is in there. He got to know too. My point being there that to establish the meat on the bone of these catchphrases that we would use was just looking at the clock there, 4 o'clock. So I don't know, you might be getting tired of hearing about it, but those are all basics of how you put it together. The other things that I think that are really important for coaches to know, each one of those little techniques that I said, this guy's in a 3. Well, what's he look at when he's in a 3? How does he line up? What's his foot stagger? We would meet collectively on that, and we would check and make sure everybody understood. You weren't going to coach that position. He had a position coach, but you knew what that position coach was telling him, and everybody knew what everybody in that defense was going to be and was supposed to be doing. So That was all part of the planning for how you get a formation together, how you get it, what kind of front you're going to play, what kind of coverage you're going to play. The other thing they're really important, I think, communication. If you don't talk, you ain't got a chance on defense, and you can't have too much. You can have that, particularly in the secondary. You have to talk every second, and you got to make this. Let me throw this in here, and I'm losing a little bit of my symmetry here. I was surprised to see what time it was. The defensive back field and the whole front, all these communications that we're talking about, you're going to go against teams that aren't going to huddle. The offense is not going to huddle. You're used to getting in the huddle, and you set up your huddle however you want to huddle. That's your business. But you can teach that from day one. Get them in the huddle. One guy talks, the signal caller, and they make the snap and they play. But hell, they ain't going to let you huddle. A lot of them are going to get you out there, and they're just going to go as fast as they can go. So you have to practice that. The other thing that I always liked, and I loved it when our offense went no huddle. So it was the best work we could get. The other thing is if when you're in there in installation in your training camp, getting ready to play football, and a lot of guys would say, "Oh, don't do that, Dan. We won't be ready for that." I would beg the offense, I want you to shift as many times as you possibly can, as early as you can. I want as much motion and crazy formation as you can give me as early as you can do it. Because, men, when you get into playing football games, you don't know what you're going to get. The offense is the dictator, and what the snap's going to be, a run or a pass, whether they're going to huddle or not, and whether it's going to be motion or whether there's going to be a shift. They're calling that in their huddle. They got that already figured out. You got it. Everything you do is going to be reaction. So if you don't practice reacting, how are you going to be able to do it when you get into the ball game? So you have to prepare this in your lesson plan. And that's a whole different page there, putting together your installation schedule and everything like that, because you got to get all what you want to do in. But you got to set time for walk and talk with your players on recognition and what do we do when they don't huddle? We got to have you got to have a plan, and you'll cut out the big plays. So that's a big thing, I think, with teaching the particular skill of a technique, so that a player, once you tell him, "Hey, you're in a plus," we all know what he's going to do, and he knows what he's going to do. Outside backers keen to triangle. You got the on guard, the off guard, the on back. The tight end is right on your nose. His sequence of execution, where does his eyes go? And as my years as a defensive backfield coach, the best help that I ever gave any of my players, was what to look at. I'll tell you this story, and Rod Woodson is the best corner I ever saw, because he was a wonder athlete, and he was bigger than most, and he was tremendously fast, stronger than most, and he was just a once in a million combination of guys. But we had another defensive back that played in the same backfield with him, and his name was Carnell Lake, and he was from UCLA, and he played in the old Bear defense. They had an outside backer that played nosed on the defensive end, and he did different things, but he was always on the ball, on the line of scrimmage, on the tight end. I said defensive end. That was what Carnell's position was. He just lined up on the tight end, took him if it was a pass, and had certain responsibilities to run. Well, Carnell came to the pros, and he really had never played off, and he was a perfect size for a strong safety, and fast. He could run. He was so quick and smart. Him and Rod in the same backfield. Actually, we should have had to pay a fine or something, because it wasn't fair for the offense to have those two guys in the same defensive backfield. But Carnell had 3 different coaches, 3 straight years. And when I first met Carnell, they kind of had him twisted around, to be honest with you. And they all meant well, I'm sure, but the end result was not good with a tremendous athlete. And after the first day that I went on the field with him, I came home to my wife and I said, Nancy, I said, if I can't help this guy, I'm never going to coach again. I said, he's got so much talent, and I'm watching him play, and no one's ever told him what to look at. So that's all I did. That's all I did. And he made all pro after 2 years of that. And he made it for 3 straight years. And then one year when Rod got hurt, actually, we had to have a corner. We were short corners and we had to have a starting corner. And I said Carnell would be the best guy for it because of his size, strength, and speed. And I said, Carnell, I know you worked your tail off being all pro strong safety. I want you to go to corner for us. This was in the middle of the season. Rod got hurt in the first game, and this was about game number 4. And what we were doing just wasn't working. Like I said, you're going to have your ideas, but you're going to have to adjust as you go along. And the video is going to show you what you're getting done and what you're not. So Carnell came in the next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we started working on corner technique. I didn't tell him anything except what to look at. And you know something? He made all pro that year as a corner. And when the year was over, I said, I got good news for you, Carnell. You don't have to play corner anymore. He just kind of smiled. But that's the story that I'm telling you about what to look at. You got to get keys for him that'll help him play their position. And those two guys, Lake and Woodson, made me a good defensive backfield coach because I really think I could have told them nothing and they would have killed the other guys. They were just tremendous players. But believe me, the technique is tied in with alignment, assignment, and what do you look at? What do you see? And you know, like I said, man, it's only 11 people and there's only 11 positions out there. And so there's only so many things they can do. And pretty soon even I could figure out, well, if they do this, it's probably going to be that. And that will help a lot. But one other thing that I think was really important is you gotta have a short memory, particularly in the positions that can get gashed. And that's your linebacker and your DBs. If a guy gets trapped in the line, he's made a bad play and he's completely voided his gap. But you got 3 linebackers or 4, and you got 4 DBs that can get the guy down on the ground with an 8-10 yard gain, and it ain't an 80-yard gain like if a corner falls down or makes a bad key and doesn't cover a guy crossing the field or something like that. So you need to, in those situations, we are going to have bad plays. And what I'm saying, I guess, is a defensive end's bad play might cost you 6 yards, and a corner's bad play is going to cost you 60 and 6 points. So you got to be able to throw that out the window because you just did it wrong. You didn't look where I told you to look, and you didn't do what we've been working on doing on your angle and all the technique that we talk about. And just get ready to play the next play. And a lot of times you got to say, get ready to play the next game, because sometimes the bear gets you and sometimes you can get the bear. But you ain't going to get the bear every play, and he ain't going to get you every play, or you ain't going to be playing very long. But the only way to compete is that last play is gone. Do one thing, learn from it what the hell you didn't do that you should have, or learn what you did really right that enabled you to be totally successful on that play. And Rod is right about one thing. I built my defense around what my guys were, and I let them break some keys, really. But I'll tell you what, they damn well better be right, or they weren't going to do it again. And I think that if you've got the players that are very instinctive, you got to give them assignments that let them be instinctive. And I think sending players on the move where they're not just all the time in the same gap and everything, you have to have it regimented like I presented it in those little sketches that I held up there. That a technique, he's got to know exactly what he's got to do. But if a guy is running every time, just running, well, let him go and knife in behind him and disrupt everything that the offense is trying to get done. I was never against that. I didn't want to take away my players' eyes because they were on the field and I was not. At the same time, it had to be within the framework of the defense. They couldn't void the defense. And that's we're down on the line a little bit in developing defense where we started very basic. But the key thing here is don't carry mistakes and don't browbeat them over the head with mistakes. They feel worse than you do, man. Ain't nobody wants to let his team down if he's got a true team spirit to him, and most people do have that. And say, hey, we made a mistake. We ain't gonna let it happen again, and let's go to work. So I think that's a good thing to put down in your notebook of things to do. Always know the game situation. When you're on the field, you got to know what quarter it is, what the score is, what's happened to you in the game earlier. Always continue to factor that in and focus it on the next play. Don't look back. Don't look back. Oh, I remember he did it. He did that. Don't worry about that. Worry about the play coming up, but know the situation. Hey, if we're winning by 10 points and there's 4 minutes to play in the game, they're going to have a hard time if they don't run by you. If you're a defensive back, and you make them go the hard way for sure. It's going to, just stay in the game and be where you're supposed to be, see what you're supposed to be, listen and hear, look and see. Those are things. If you don't take anything else away from this talk, take that with you. The secret of no big plays. I've tried to tell you that it's a step by step, rule by rule, a built-in way that you play defense together, and then you really synchronize that unity feeling that they start to get a lot of pride. And I might run a playback 8 times when on the game replay if I had 8 or 9 players at the ball. And I just play it, and I just give them as much love as I could because I understood that that's what was going to let us be successful. And when they fly, there ain't nothing better than seeing a bunch of guys fly to the ball. That's the game of football.